Hello, my name is Rebecca Macklad and you are listening to The Future is Om. This is the podcast where we dive into the minds of some of the world's most groundbreaking spiritual masters, mentors, and movement makers to decode ancient wisdom in order to heal and move humanity forward in the 21st century and beyond. Because we believe a more beautiful future starts with Om. Welcome to another episode of the Future is Om podcast. Now, for any fans of The Voice Australia, you might have been pleasantly surprised to see for the first time ever a sound healer and voice activation extraordinaire grace the stage. In fact, she even gave Rita Ora, a global pop superstar and judge on The Voice, and onstage sound healing. Now, for anyone in the spiritual community, this is definitely exciting and so amazing to see, what we do and love, which is the power of healing being shared with so many on such a popular platform as The Voice. Her name is Ali Skiba. Well done, Ali, on last night's audition. We were all behind you. A few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to have the honour of having Ali live in the studio to share with me and our audience the ins and outs of her personal transformation and journey of soul discovery. See, Ali, like so many of us, had found herself in a successful life, quote unquote, but one that in many ways lacked the soul significance that she craved. Eventually, she made the decision to leave her hometown of San Francisco before embarking on a transformative journey across 16 countries and 5 continents, delving deep into a myriad of healing modalities. It was in breathwork that Ali found her sanctuary, alongside learning to harness the innate power of her own voice and the therapeutic potential of sound. Today, as a practitioner of breathwork, sound healing, and voice activation, Ali channels her experiences to guide others back to their innate healing abilities, advocating for self-awareness and the belief that we are all our own best healers. Over the course of today's conversation, Ali and I explored what it takes to transition from a high-stress tech role to a life truly aligned with one's soul. Together, we delve into the intricacies of breathwork, sound healing, and the transformative power of voice as a conduit for soul activation. Ali educates us on the profound connection between sound and the human energy field, articulating spirituality in a tangible way, anchored in science as the bedrock to demystify what is so often perceived as esoteric. We discuss ways individuals can harness their innate healing powers, and Ali also shares her insights on the challenges and rewards of being a soulpreneur in the modern age, emphasizing the importance of authenticity, purpose-driven action, and continuous learning. And we've saved the best for last because Ali so kindly brought her sound bowls into the studio and recorded for us a magical sound healing, which, assuming you're not driving at the moment, is a truly beautiful way to integrate the learnings from this soul-aligned and divine journey that Ali and I took together across the course of today's conversation, where we truly unpacked the wisdom, the wonder, the magic of the sounds of the soul. Ali will also have this sound healing available as a separate download on her website. So do make sure you jump online, jump on Instagram and follow Ali at Melodious Yogi, where you can keep your eyes peeled, I imagine, for her audition on The Voice if you missed it, but also to be able to download this beautiful sound healing, which will be featured at the end of today's podcast. So for now, let's dive in. Welcome to the Future Is On podcast. Ali Skiba, it is such a joy to have you here live in the studio with me today.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Now, I'm going to dive straight into question one because we have quite the journey to go on throughout the course of the podcast today. There is an amazing quote by Indira Gandhi who said, "The power to question is the basis of all human progress." And so I am curious to know, what question are you currently pondering that is guiding your life forwards at this particular point in time?
Beautiful quote and great question. So for me, I'm constantly reflecting on the vibration behind my intention, whether that is to go for a walk or create, an event, a workshop, anything that I'm doing. I'm checking in with myself and getting clear on what is the vibration behind this intention, and is it coming from a place of love or is it coming from a place of fear? And ultimately my aim is to be a vibrational match to love and to that which my heart desires. So often, I think a lot of us are operating from fear-based beliefs. And so for me, especially coming from my background in corporate, where I chased a degree and a lifestyle based off of, fear of, not having enough, I'm now sort of untangling all those beliefs and really reprogramming into an abundance mindset and, the frequency of love.
And I love the distinction between intention, which we hear about quite a lot, the power of setting an intention, but the distinction between the intention and the vibration behind the intention. I think that's quite a powerful frame to begin to really distill what it is we bring to fundamentally to our goals, to what we want to achieve in our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're vibrational beings, and whether it's getting up to get a glass of water because we're afraid we're going to run out, or we're nourishing our bodies from a place of love and, stillness. So it's just every little thing we can look at from, a vibrational perspective.
So in doing my research for today's podcast, I came across your beautifully written biography, which started with these words: "After 10 years of working in high-stress tech corporate environments, I hit rock bottom. I was waking up with debilitating anxiety, brain fog, struggling with depression, adult acne, and operating in a perpetual state of fight or flight. I didn't want to live anymore." Profound words. Can you share with me and our listeners a little bit more about this fork in the road of your life, with a focus on how this particular chapter catalyzed your purpose today?
Yes, absolutely. So, growing up, I looked at my father as, the epitome of success, software engineer, stoic, provided a lovely lifestyle for the family. And I looked at my mom and sister, the epitome of the wild, divine feminine. Um, and I looked at emotions and feelings as dangerous, risk to my success. And I looked at, this masculine energy, this strong, engineering mindset as the epitome of success. And so for me, I really, at a very young age, squashed that, intuitive, feely, flowy side of myself, with the belief that I would be successful and I would be safe if I kept myself strong and tough. And so I pursued an electrical engineering degree, climbed the corporate ladder, working in San Francisco. I was, getting promoted left, right, and center, and I was kicking butt. But at the same time, I really didn't feel like I belonged there. I felt like I was living a lie, and I had achieved what I thought to be success. I was making great money. I was living in San Francisco, had a great apartment, but I was also incredibly anxious because I was at a place in my career early on where I just said yes to everything. People
Mm.
pleaser. So I was saying yes to everything and I was doing really great at my job, but at the same time, I just had no enthusiasm for the work. I mean, other than working with people. So I transitioned from the engineering work to program managing the engineers. And so I found some peace in working with humans. And I thought, okay,
Mm.
nerd herding, as I call it. But ultimately, I was spending my weekdays in this perpetual state of fight or flight. I was running from meeting to meeting. I mean, so many of us are doing this day to day, running from back to back meetings, and go, 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 go. And then you get home. And for me, it was like, I need to switch off. So what did I do? I would smoke a bunch of weed. I would
Mm.
drink close to a bottle every night of wine. And my weekends, were sort of like it was just like you're spinning in this hamster wheel during the week, and then on the weekends I would just sort of spin off and be like, "Wow, what do I want to do?" I was so focused on achieving success that I didn't even really factor in what made me happy, and I didn't really know what my passions were, and I
Mm.
felt really confused that I didn't really have any passions other than getting really stoned. And I mean, I had the guitar, which, at around 16 I started teaching myself, but a lot of the songs I started to write were just pretty sad. Sad about
Mm.
how I just felt kind of lost and kind of down, and of course I felt disconnected because I felt alone in my struggles. I also on the exterior was living this, dream life, working the dream job and, in a great city, and all on the outside it just looked like success, and so I was kind of confused. I was really distraught at why wasn't I happy, and what makes me happy and what even is happiness. And so I threw myself into yoga teacher training while I was working in San Francisco. I had also just gone through a massive breakup and got my heart broken for the first
Mm.
time, after really the first time ever feeling and falling in love. And so the oxytocin goggles wore off, and I realized I didn't like my job. I didn't like the city I was living in. I just felt like I don't really, I don't really care for this life that I'm living. So I threw myself into yoga teacher training as a means of maybe I can find another mode of income. Little did I know it would be the most just heart opening spiritual experience in terms of learning ancient ways, of the yogis, and tuning into practices of asana, the movement and the breathing. And I was a mess pretty much the whole teacher training, crying and feeling all those emotions that I had pretty much silenced most of my life. They all started to come up through every posture,
Mm.
every hip opener. I opened up a little bit more and more, and then I just Googled yoga jobs abroad. At the time, I was still working in corporate in San Francisco, and then I found this whole world of opportunities where you could travel the world in exchange for room, teach yoga in exchange for room and board. So in typical YOLO fashion, I quit my job, I sold everything I owned, and I booked a one-way ticket to Panama to work on a boat in the Caribbean. So I was to be teaching yoga, cooking and cleaning, which for anyone who knows me knows that is absolutely hilarious because
Yeah.
I'm not much of a cook.
So, can I just ask you, while we're
Yeah.
at this point in the story, tell me what was going on with regards to your inner narrative, because there must have been a part of you that is like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. How were you feeling at that point of time as you kind of traverse through the chasm between, as we were saying before the podcast, this life by default where you were kind of just going through the motions, chasing the golden carrots, being all of the things that the world told you you should be in order to achieve this idea of quote unquote a successful life. And then all of a sudden you have this kind of heartbroken open experience through the relationship breakup, through obviously yoga teacher training, and you feel the call of your soul. And all of that, in looking back, you're like, wow, what a transformative period. But at the time, there must have been a lot of fear to navigate.
I was terrified. I had
Yeah.
never experienced fear in such a visceral way. I mean, where, of course, I was program manager, so I had literally created a whole roadmap of like, Ali travels the world, and here's my checklist, and here are all the things I need to do, from like clearing out the closets to, subletting the room, which ended up being ditching the entire flat. But that was sort of a later consequence. But for me, it was I had so much fear because I knew this was going to be a massive, massive jump. And of course, there was, I had, very little F's to give at the time. And I'm like, well, let's just see, because this life is too short to spend it unhappy. But at the same time, I think there was that part of me that likes to know and likes to have control. I think we all have that element where it's like, I have no idea where I'll be in 2 months, 3 months, because I booked one ticket and the plan was to figure out all the different countries as I went along. And dropping that control and that plan and that timeline to just really let myself roam free was so terrifying. I mean, I would wake up in the morning because I was still finishing my final weeks at the office, and I remember waking up shivering because I was shaking because I was so scared. And a part of me, I had so many things to do. And also I needed to start practicing my yoga sequences because, okay, I'm going to go teach yoga around the world. And, but I had no motivation to do it. It was like, I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to, I just, it was very overwhelming, and I had never experienced fear quite like that.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important thing to talk about and share, especially if we're having a conversation around what it is to really step into your soul purpose, is that this is a journey for the courageous. And it's one that I believe is truly worth taking because this is what it is to be alive. But I think it's also helpful for people to know that a part of the process is essentially that shadow work and dealing with all of those emotions that want to draw you back into the safety of, again, of the life by default. And yet the soul is calling and this other horizon is out there. And, in looping back to where you were at, you found yourself on a boat.
Found myself on a boat. My first task on that boat was to take a mosquito zapper and to go into the dark, moist crevices of the boat and kill all the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And clean the toilets. And I thought, okay, maybe
This is a good metaphor.
Yeah, maybe this is it. Wax on, wax out. Maybe this is where I come to appreciate the corporate life I had. And I thought maybe I just get my hands really dirty and realize how good I had it, and just needed to get that out of my system. And but it was a very different. I mean, I only lasted about two weeks on the boat, and then jumped ship to then work at a surf lodge off the coast of Panama, and just continued to travel from there. But yeah, it was, again, it was on the outside. Wow, she's living the dream. She's traveling and she's quit her corporate job. But there I was so anxious because now it was like, well, where's home? I'm living out of a backpack. Where am I going to go in 2 weeks? What am I going to do when I run out of money? How am I going to provide for myself? I'm not even making money as a teacher at that time because I was just exchanging for room and board. Found myself in Costa Rica at at basically a hippie commune slash surf camp where I was volunteering in exchange for sleeping in an 18-person bunk dorm shelter in the in the rainforest. And I thought, well, this isn't necessarily as lovely and as glamorous as it sounds to be traveling through Costa Rica teaching yoga. And then I realized, okay, got to get out of there. And then I kept traveling, and I put the yoga teaching on pause. And then I went on a serious quest because I still was feeling anxious, and very fearful of, like, like I said, what happens when I run out of money? How am I going to make something of myself? So I went on a mission looking for every healer, every guru, every shaman I could find, because I thought maybe there was something that I need to have healed within, maybe if I go to, Peru and do ayahuasca, I'll wake up, and know exactly what I need to do. And all up and, I've healed my traumas and dramas. And, I tried a lot of different things on my travels, from meditating 10 hours a day, 10 days straight in Sri Lanka, to, these strange treatments in India. I had my eat, pray, love, but it was, as I've said before, more of a eat, pray, cry, eat, repeat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people would relate, if they've gone through these kind of transformative chapters in any capacity. It doesn't have to be a story just like this. The need to, you've got this need to heal, and this kind of a curiosity, but when you don't know what to do, just throwing yourself at every healing modality possible. And there's certainly a lot to be gained from that. But I know from reading through your story that you did land on something that felt completely true for you, and clearly was a deeply transformative experience, and one that I know is still a big part of your life, and that is breathwork. Tell me what it was about breathwork that resonated differently for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So by the time I got to Bali, I attended this Activate Consciousness Breathwork workshop, and I really had no idea what I was getting into. Um, and we went through some really intense, deep cyclic breathing. And after that session, I mean, I don't know where I went. I went somewhere, but I felt like, for the first time in my whole life, this immense sense of clarity and peace. And it felt like my nervous system really was able to rest in this parasympathetic, this rest and digest place where I hadn't been for, pretty much all of my 20s. Because I was in survival mode, and I tapped into something that I realized I didn't need a guru or a shaman or a healer to access. I was able to tap into through my own breath. And so, of course, the bliss junkie in me had to know more. And so I started studying breath work, and through that process I started exploring. By the time I was in India, was at an ashram, a music ashram, for 2 months, picked up the Himalayan singing bowls. So after all the breathwork practice, I would put the bowls, I literally had 7 of them, all around me, and just ding, 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 after the breathwork. And I felt like, as I started to heal myself with the breath, and really, really restore my nervous system and come back to this place of stillness, I felt a desire to sing. And I'd been singing on and off as a teenager with the guitar, but the breath work was a huge catalyst to finding my voice. And then it became this beautiful, beautiful relationship of breath work and sound healing, which I continued to pursue, and started, playing at the yoga studios in Bali with the sound bowls and guitar, and started holding workshops in India. And it was all really new to me, but I knew that there was something really magical.
Well, I can certainly attest to that fact. Having already today, we've done a little bit of a sound healing in the studio here, which we will be sharing with everyone at the end of the podcast. And I can only imagine, obviously we didn't do breathwork, but I can only imagine the combination of breathwork with sound and your voice would be so deeply, deeply moving.
Yeah, it's a powerful combination,
Mm.
breath work. Just to talk about breath a little bit, breath is life, and in many almost every language, breath is synonymous with life force, whether it's prana, ki, chi. Breath is the vehicle by which our life force travels. And so a lot of us get stuck in this shallow chest breathing pattern where we're not moving our life force. We're in this sympathetic nervous system response, fight or flight. We're, stuck in the chest breathing pattern in survival mode. And when we're doing that, we're just not moving energy in the body. And it's no wonder we experience this sense of existential dread
Mm.
in our window of tolerance. It's this sort of a measure of how we're able to cope with our stressors in life. And for a lot of us, our window of tolerance has become itty bitty because we're not really in a place, our nervous systems aren't really in a place to handle stress. So that one email or that one, car in traffic is enough to throw you over the edge. And so what I found with breath work is that it was able to substantially, widen my window of tolerance, and that those things that once threw me over the edge, it was just like, oh. And I've done a lot of meditation, and I felt like breath work has been going straight to day 10 of that,
Yeah.
Vipassana.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with that. I was introduced to breathwork probably about 6 months ago, and a bit like you, it opened me up in a way unlike any other healing modality that I had done. And like you, I've tried nearly
Mm,
everything over the past 2 decades. So much so that I did. I've just finished like a 10-week breathwork facilitator
mm.
course as well. And look, the only thing I would say to anyone listening is if you haven't tried it, go and check out one of Ali's workshops, because
Yes,
it does definitely take you to a completely different level.
absolutely. Or grab a download on my website.
Yeah.
And, just to briefly touch on, what's happening there physically and why it's so much more, at least for me, more effective than meditation is because as we do, this deep cyclic breathing, we start to quiet the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking mind. And when we quiet the thinking mind, we allow for the innate sensory wisdom of
Mm.
our bodies to take over. And so many of the ailments that we're dealing with in today, in today's age is really just a byproduct of disordered thinking. We're thinking ourselves into disease disorder because we're stressing about the past, we're worrying about the future, and so it creates this vibrational dissonance, and creates all sorts of chaos in the body and in our cells. And so when we can calm down the mind, it's like the body gets this opportunity to tap back in and to send energy where it needs to go. And we were thinking, or we were sensory beings long
Mm.
before we were thinking beings. And somewhere along the lines, we've just completely, separated from that intuitive sensory wisdom. And we've started to think our way through our feelings, to think our way through our emotions, when really, we're meant to feel it. And that's why when we can quiet the mind, the body can heal.
Mm. Ali, you just mentioned some of the resources on your website, and so I want to ask you a question that I guess is a little less about the spiritual and a little more about the entrepreneurial
Mm,
side of you. And the reason I want to dig into this a little bit is because I think a big part of my purpose with this podcast is essentially helping people to amplify their healing tools in the
mm,
world, amplify their gifts. And, sometimes I think people can kind of get trapped into that cycle of, being in service, but not asking money for it, or being in service and not feeling like they have the resources to really reach a lot of people. And that's where I think having that kind of entrepreneurial blueprint alongside your healing gifts is something that's really useful in
mm.
terms of being able to amplify our in the world and fundamentally, ignite human progress in the 21st century. And that is why the combination of these two things is so vital at this point in time. So I'd really love to know, what are your tips for any like soulpreneurs, practitioners, teachers, healers who are out there and maybe listening to this podcast with regards to how they can go about amplifying their work in the world?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think the first thing to really get clear on is what beliefs do you have around spirituality not
Mm,
being worthy of financial exchange? Because I think a lot of us think, no, I want to help. And so I feel guilty charging, but it's an energy exchange. And
mhm,
ultimately, when you're giving a service, you should receive some sort of energy exchange in return. And so, first and foremost, getting clear on any of your beliefs that maybe say that you're not worthy of receiving, or that say that you shouldn't receive because this is just being a good human. So that's a really important piece to really get clear on. And then, of course, I always recommend following, the breadcrumbs. Like a lot of the offerings that I've created have been because somebody has asked for it, or my dad has been like, "Do you have a recording of that thing that you do for the voice activation and, sound?" I'm like,
mm,
"Oh no, I should do that." And so I do it. And then I send it to him. And then I'm like, oh, I should put this on YouTube. And then, oh, okay, maybe I'll sell it on my website too. And so it's following the breadcrumbs of, because we may have these ideas of what we think we need to do to, again, thinking what we need to do to be successful. But ultimately, it's tuning into what are the signs in the universe and what are people
mm,
asking for. And, or a friend said, I'm feeling really anxious. Do you recommend any, meditations or breath work? And I'm like, gosh, I don't have the space to have her over right now, but if I could just send her a recording of a breathwork sequence or, a sound healing, brilliant. Why don't I go home and record it? So again, it's listening to the cues of like, what does the community need? What are people asking for? And what do you feel equipped to provide?
mm. Beautiful. Such useful advice. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, I think I might have mentioned this to you when we were looking in the podcast. However, in terms of the structure of the rest of today's conversation, we're going to be moving through the 5 states of consciousness,
Mm,
which are represented by the Om symbol. So let's kick off with the waking state, which is the bottom curve of the
okay.
Om symbol. This is the state of consciousness we experience when we're, awake, we're aware of our thoughts, feelings, and perception. So it's essentially about how we sense the world around us. One of the things that I really admire in sound healers is from my observation, you have like this innate ability to deeply listen. And I
Mm,
just want to point to the fact that deeply listening is very different to hearing. We
mhm.
all hear lots of sounds as we move through the day, but to bring a vibration and an intention to the way in which we listen, I think is a whole different thing. And it's not something that we necessarily learn at school or
Mm.
people even speak about that often in our everyday lives. So I'm wondering, as a sound healer, how does deep listening inform your ability to heal others through sound? And for the rest of us, what can we learn from you about the art of deep listening?
Mm. I think it comes down to really tuning in, but not necessarily on an audio perspective, but tuning in. So if I'm holding a workshop with a group of people, it's really feeling the energy of the room, tuning into the vibration of, are these people, really high energy, or are they feeling really low? Do they need me to, provide a little more enthusiasm, or should I tone it down a bit? Like, what is the energy of the room? And then with that information, then catering what I'm going to share and what I'm going to offer to best suit the needs of the room or the needs of the individual. And for me, when I think of listening and when I think of, providing a sound bath experience, it's so much more a feeling space for me, and really allowing myself to drop into that vibration
Mm,
and not necessarily yeah, I guess sound is of course a critical component of sound healing, but how does it feel in me, and how does, the resonance of my voice and the instrument feel together? And ultimately, if I feel it's in resonance, I feel it's in, in harmony, then I trust that those listening will receive it.
Mm. And I'm curious, when you play the bowls,
Mm.
do you find the sound resonance from the bowls will also change according to the type of spaces you're in? Is there anything that you notice in the sound itself?
Well, I mean, every space has different acoustics.
Yeah.
So, like if I'm playing in, a subway station, which I don't really take the bowls there that often,
That would be
but
so
it'd
cool
be
though, wouldn't
some
it?
sweet reverb
Yeah.
effects. Whereas if I'm playing in an open, like a corporate setting, uh, it's a bit more, less reverb effect. But the bowls carry incredibly potent sound. So as you heard, without even a microphone, the crystal bowls, the crystal representing the earth element, it carries such a potent vibration.
Mm,
And I think ultimately, depending on how many you're playing and how hard you're, working the mallet around the circumference, it'll change depending, and I think also depending on the energy that I'm bringing into the space. So
mm,
there's so many factors. We're all vibrational beings, as I mentioned before, and we're all vibrating at different frequencies from one moment to the next. And I like to think that, I mean, well, quantum physics has already proven this, that, it's all really just empty space and it's changing from moment to moment. So it's different every time.
mm. And can you tell me, how does the sound itself interact with the human energy field?
Mm. So we are, because we are vibrational beings, we have the ability to move matter with sound. We can move matter with sound, we can move energy with sound. And so there's something that's really interesting that also happens in the brain. It's called brainwave entrainment. In fact, when there is an individual receiving a sound bath, studies have shown that their brain waves will start to mimic the patterns of the frequency that's being played to create this resonance, this
Mm,
coherence, because we're always, everything in the universe is looking to move to a more sustainable vibration or way of operating. And so there's so many beautiful impacts that sound can have on people, and I find the most profound is an energy release. Is really shifting. You can think of sand on a plate that's vibrating, and you see it start
mm,
to take different shapes and to create these beautiful different patterns. And what's actually been shown through the study of somatics is that you know as you raise the vibration to a higher frequency, the shape will first completely fall apart, and then it will give way to a more complex structure. And so it's a beautiful metaphor that I've shared with groups before, is that, you know, when it seems like everything is falling apart, it's so that we can give way to a more complex, a more
mm.
beautiful, pattern in the universe or in our lives. And so yeah, it's just, I mean, there's so many studies that have started to come out around the study and the impacts of sound on the human body, and I'm just tickled to be sort of on the forefront, at least
Absolutely.
I mean, at least in this culture. I think there's, ancient traditions where sound is, goes back to, thousands and thousands of years ago. But I think, in the Western culture, um, it's new and it's now
Mm.
being accepted, which is beautiful.
What I love in listening to you speak today is that you seem to have such a beautiful integration of the science alongside the spirituality. Maybe your engineering hat has
Mhm.
helped you to translate ancient healing wisdom in a way that is kind of intersecting with science and with a language that, that in the Western world, the masses understand because essentially our society has been built upon that paradigm.
Mm.
But it's useful to be able to have that skill, especially when you're translating ancient wisdom to a new audience that needs it today more so than ever before.
Oh, yeah, especially for my corporate clients. Like,
Mm.
if I go in there talking about their chakras,
Yeah.
they're gonna be like, "All right, who's this woo-woo hippie chick?"
Yeah.
But it's really important and, for me as well, I wanna know why, I wanna know how, and I wanna understand the intersection of the mysticism and the science so that I
Yeah.
can not only better understand what's going on in my life, but be able to communicate to those who are more scientific minded and who may not be as receptive to the terms energy and vibration, but maybe more so, when I talk about studies and, science, which, at the end of the day, we're all speaking the same thing when we
Mm.
talk about energy because, there's no denying that energy is real. But yeah, I think it's important to be able to speak to it on a level that resonates
Yeah.
to all audience.
And I think it's also about like integrating the polarity. Do you know what I mean? Like I have found, over say the last 15 years of I studied as a healer and have been a chakra dance facilitator, and you kind of get put into one camp or the other. You're spiritual or you're
Mm.
scientific. And if you're scientific, well, I'm not really into that metaphysical stuff. Or, it's like these labels that place people in one camp or the other, where
Mhm.
actually we need to start taking a much more integrated approach, not just to that polarity, probably just to polarity
Yeah.
in general. But, that's why I think one of, if we're looking at some of the tips and tools for people working in this space, I do think if you can really do the work and understand the science that sits in alignment with your healing work, that it is actually a superpower to be able to translate that wisdom to more people and to create more impact at a time where we need to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's move on to the unconscious state,
Okay.
which is the upper curve of the Om symbol. This is otherwise known as our sleeping state. However, for the purposes of a podcast, it's not that interesting to talk about sleep. So I tend to dive into the workings of the shadow self, which is essentially the unconscious aspects of who we are. On last week's podcast, we were talking about Rumi's guest house and the idea
Mm.
that we invite many experiences and feelings into our guest house, our soul's guest house. And you can think of the shadow as being like the dark closets in the back of the guest
Mm.
house. And so I'm wondering if you can share with me a little bit more about your work as a sound healer, with regards to working with these kind of deeply unconscious aspects of people, and I guess maybe share with me some case studies, stories of how your work has enabled people to start to really process those more difficult or hidden parts of their being.
Yeah, and I'll weave in the breath work because it's been so profound in,
Mm.
helping people access those parts because again, sound healing is profound in many ways and from a healing perspective, though to quiet that prefrontal cortex and to allow us on a very deep, subtle, unconscious layer to resolve those traumas and those things. Breath work is this is why, I always pair it with the sound healing so that we can quiet that prefrontal cortex and really tap into it. So I'll give you an example of one of my clients. Beautiful woman. She was diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia. It's a neurological pain condition that feels like somebody's stabbing you in the face with a knife.
Mm.
She had this pain for 5 days straight. She also has MS, which made her more susceptible to this. And ultimately, the doctor sent her home with pain meds and said, "Meh, sorry. Sorry, it may go away, it may come back, you may have it for, however long, aka the suicide disease, because so many people end their lives because they can't handle it.
Mm.
I mean, I
I can't
couldn't
even imagine.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she literally knocked on my door. This woman lives in my building and she knew that I was doing this work. And, she's heard all sorts of things that I do in my, in the treatment room, from the drums to the vocals and the bowls and the breath work. And she literally knocked on my door and goes, "I need help." And, brought her in, took her through a session and, Whew, it took 3 sessions to really get to the bottom of it, but, what was really important was this is why it's so important to know a bit more about kinda the psychophysiological, defense mechanisms and the
Mm.
protection that's going on a deeper level, because there's this thing called the urgency barrier, and it was coined by a man named Leonard Orr, who developed what is called the rebirthing breathwork technique. And what it goes to say, by the way, this guy is interesting. He relived his own birth trauma in a bathtub.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he started to find some really interesting things that come about when we push past what he coined the urgency barrier. And so ultimately, the urgency barrier is what happens. Well, let me take it back a notch. So, our subconscious mind will do everything it can to deflect from dealing with trauma stored in the body. So, oftentimes, when we're approaching that barrier, whether it's through a sound healing practice or whether it's through breath work or whether it's through anything, any healing modality, our subconscious mind wants to prevent us from dealing with those darker elements, those traumatic
Mm.
layers. And so what we'll do to prevent us from breaking through to that side is we'll dissociate, fall asleep, or we'll stop doing what we're doing entirely. We'll get aggravated, we'll get agitated, we'll get up and leave the session, or we'll, ease off on the breath, or we'll walk away, whatever it may be. And so I coached her through this, and I said, you may get to a point where you feel either really agitated or you fall asleep. And with the sessions that I do with the drum and the vocals and it's hard to fall asleep when I'm pounding a drum on your chest. But she got to this point, and she shared later after our third session that she was so aggravated. She wanted to leave. The pain intensified, but she remembered what I spoke about pushing past the urgency
Mm.
barrier. And she hit this peak of pain and peak of agitation, but she stuck through it. She kept breathing, and she kept, we had the bowls all around her, and I, kept with the sound. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. The pain went away. She actually forgot to take the meds the next day because she didn't have any pain. And then she continued days that followed, and she hasn't had a relapse. And it's been, I don't know, maybe 5 months. So it's wild. And I think also there was trauma that had been a huge catalyst to that neurological
That
pain disorder.
condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, of course, our minds are always trying to wrap around a story. And when the mind can't wrap around a story, we sort of feel defeated. But at the end of the day, we don't need a story. We don't need to define it. We don't even need to know what the trauma was. But when we can release it, we can have profound healing. And so she was able to get her life back, to work again, to get off her medication. And I emailed over 200 journalists to get this story in the
Out there.
news.
Yeah.
And eventually I heard back from Channel 7 and was able to get the article out. And, I haven't really haven't really heard much from that, but I trust it's out
Mm.
there and the right person will hear it. But this is ultimately why I've been on this mission to share this work, the power of breathwork and sound healing with as many people as possible, because I want more people to find relief and to find peace and to be able to, yeah, to get their lives
To
back.
have the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an incredible story. Well, thank you for sharing it with me on The Future Is On,
Mm.
because it's certainly one that is worth getting out there with regards to the deep significance of this work in fundamentally transforming lives. So let's talk about the dream state, which is the midcurve of the Om symbol. This is essentially the liminal space between the conscious and the unconscious mind. So again, for those of us who've been on breathwork journeys, you would be familiar with this space, but really anyone who has done any kind of meditation would have also connected with this liminal space in between. Now, if the future is Om, and if the focus is on healing humankind and the planet, then given you're somebody who has done so many different healing modalities, and you mentioned doing ayahuasca in Peru, which I dare say would supercharge you into this dream state that we're talking about. Given that context, how important do you think this dream state is with regards to igniting human progress for the planet at this particular point in time?
Well, I think everybody may have a different interpretation of dream state, or at least.
Absolutely.
So I'll take it back to some science where I talk about alpha brainwaves.
Yeah.
So alpha brainwaves is essentially the brainwave state. So deltas are sleeping. Think of delta as sleeping and beta as wide awake, and alpha is sort of the bridge between, right before we go to bed, right before we hit dream time. And when we're in alpha brainwaves, it's essentially bringing that, because out of our mind, we're only using 5% of our subconscious mind. 95% is subconscious. So ultimately, when we're in alpha brainwave state, we can actually create a bridge between the two. And so when we're in this state, we're highly suggestive. So if someone were to tell us things, or we repeat affirmations right before we're going to bed, which is a beautiful practice to do, we can start to program our subconscious mind, and we can start to take control, because our subconscious beliefs is what is ultimately running the show in our lives. And so many of these beliefs are not even, conscious to the waking mind, but they run our lives. And so I think it's really important to have different practices that help you access altered states of consciousness, or access those alpha brain waves, so that you can start to reprogram and shift those beliefs, and ultimately, change your life.
And so, there's a lot of buzz at the moment about psychedelics, about plant medicine with regards to treating depression and anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder. What was your experience like with plant medicine? And generally speaking, what is your take on the subject?
I'm a big fan of plant medicine. So, I think it's really important, though, to highlight the importance of setting, and dose. So where are you doing it? Who are you doing it with? What is your intention? Have you set one? And how much are you taking? And so I think in my experience, I've taken it too far in times, where I've literally felt like I'm falling off the edge of the universe and questioning my identity. And it was not a happy ego
Not
dissolution.
fun.
It was a, oh no, who am I? I can't remember. And this is scary. So I won't do that again. But so I think it's important to note that, they need to be taken with intense respect. It is sacred, and to think, oh, it's fun, let's just take some mushrooms, or let's just, have some San Pedro, and it's really, really sacred. And, these plants are not messing around. And ultimately, if you go too far, odds are it was necessary and destined for your expansion for some rhyme or reason. And I will say, in my experience,
trust that process.
Yeah. When I have taken it too far, it showed me things that, for example, the fear of losing my mind, the fear of letting someone take care of me, or worried that, that I lose control. And so it has, at the end of the day, I've learned, precious gems from every experience. But what I really love about particularly psilocybin, many call the magic mushrooms, is the ability to create new neural pathways in the brain. And to allow us to create, new connections, because so many of us, when you think of, the way the thoughts go is like water running through the Grand Canyon. And when it keeps going down that route, it creates a really deep groove, a giant canyon. And so when we work with different plant medicines, it can help us connect to parts that water may have never flown before, flown. Does water fly? Maybe. Well, actually, that one time. But depending on the plant. But so it can really help us create new connections in the brain. And, some have used the analogy, it's like taking a mountain of snow that has the grooves that people have been skiing or snowboarding down, and it creates a fresh slate of powder that you can decide where you want to take it. And, it's ultimately, again, going back to the intention. When you're doing it, are you doing it to, explore and expand and, to tap into something, greater than yourself? Or are you doing it to run away and get high? And, I know personally as, a bliss junkie, anything that could get me high growing up, I was all over it because I was looking to escape. I was looking to disconnect from my feelings. But now when I look at plant medicines, it's how can I be more embodied, and how can I reconnect with my heart, my true essence, the earth, those that I love, the sky, everything. It's looking at the sacredness in all things. And for me, plant medicine has been a huge, huge teacher in my life to show me, the truth when, the small self, the ego, the mind likes to get in the way, and all these fear-based beliefs. And what plants have shown me time and time again, whether they're mind-altering plants or just a flower, is the preciousness of all life. And that really, fear is just, what do they say? Uh, what is the acronym? False evidence of proving real, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really it's been just a reminder time and time again that, the truth is love, and nature is, a direct proof of that abundance. And that, the trees, don't think about where to grow. They feel their way. The flowers don't think about where the sun is. They feel it. And so for me, it's been this constant reminder of feeling it and trusting that I will be supported, and that there's no need to fear. And in fact, fear is only going to dilute, the process, and just, murky the waters. And so, yeah, it's been a big teacher in my world. I'm a big fan of microdosing.
And everything you've just shared is a perfect segue to
Epic.
the next part of the Om symbol, which is Maya. And that is
The
the
illusion.
semicircle. Exactly. It is a fundamental concept in Hindu philosophy. And yes, you're right. In Sanskrit, it translates to the illusion. Now, I think for anyone who's kind of on the spiritual path, they will have some basic understanding that, our goal is essentially to live with one foot in two camps. Now, as much as we want to transcend the ego is a part of the illusion, which is essential to our physical existence. Like we need an ego, we need an identity, we need the constraints of the physical world. Otherwise, we wouldn't actually be in a 3D world or have any way to distinguish our role, our purpose, each other, any of those things. So it doesn't matter how spiritual you are, you need to have one foot in Maya. On the other hand, you also need to have a foot in the space of what is essentially surrender to the great mystery, this notion that we are all intrinsically interconnected, that we are part of this mystical fabric that is within us and around us and beyond us, the Om. And so my question for you is essentially around how you go about in your day-to-day keeping one foot in both camps.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I have, in those experiences where I have taken my journeys a bit too far, I realized, oh, there's a reason why we have the mind and the ego and one foot on the earth, is because, we need to be able to function on this plane of reality. I need a mind so that if I do need to crack open a spreadsheet, I can actually function. And, there are people in my own family who are still on this plane of existence, but have seemed to have left the building in terms of, just operating on a different plane of existence. They're super tapped in and tuned in, to, I would say, almost psychic realms. But, when it comes to are you going to meet me at 3 o'clock, or are you going to meet me at 3 o'clock? And it's like, we don't really know
And we've all
where
met
they
those
are.
people, haven't
Yeah.
we? You know, there's a vacancy to the eyes. Like, we've all met them.
But they'll tell you what's inside your soul, and you're like, oh my God, really? So yeah, I think for me, it all goes back down to like, how am I taking care of myself? What foods am I eating? What am I consuming, from the foods to the media or lack thereof, to the people and interactions, to the sunshine exposure that I'm getting, to the earth under my feet, to the water that I'm drinking. It is all, essential to my ability to function and feel like a happy human being. Because back in the days where I was binge eating, drinking, and smoking and eating crap because I had the drunk munchies or just stoned, yeah, I'd wake up feeling hungover and like crap because my body was filled with crap. And I just didn't realize how, yeah, we literally are what we consume. And it wasn't until I really got clean with, I started doing all sorts of detoxing and juice cleanse and clearing my body, that I was able to tap into this entirely different vibration of, I didn't know I was capable of being so happy. And it was like my baseline of happiness had just been kind of at a much lower level, because I was not treating my body with love and with reverence and with, that sacred respect. And now, I eat organic. I make sure I get my feet on the earth. I drink water from, a spring. I make sure that I'm not consuming. I don't watch TV. I don't read the news. And, ultimately it's also that I can keep myself grounded and keep myself balanced. And when I feel my body is taken care of, when I feel my soul is nourished, I'm having those connections with community. I'm having, face-to-face conversations, physical touch, all those things that, our soul needs. Then I feel that I'm able to, be of service, and I'm able to, yeah, come from a place of not fear of survival of what do I need to do to make money, but how can I serve, and how can I do it from a place of grounded support, stability, and yeah, of balance.
Amazing. So we have reached the pinnacle of the symbol,
Yippee-doo.
signified by the dot at the top. And it is here that we're reminded of infinite consciousness. I think this is an energy that is really difficult to translate into words in any capacity. And so rather than formulating a question, at this point in the podcast and in our conversation today, I'd love to invite you to simply take a moment and to see what drops in from the Bindu for you, and what you feel needs to be spoken through you at this exact moment in time.
All right, let me just take a deep breath. I truly feel that humanity is on the path of destruction if we do not do and take the necessary action to tend to our spiritual beings, to tend to our spiritual selves. I feel there's a lot of suffering that will continue to unfold. And ultimately, I just want to remind everybody that we are all one, and that we are all connected. And when you suffer, I suffer. And when you heal, I heal. And that whether it's just one smile across the street to that stranger, or, that thought, that well wish to someone on the other side of the world, it carries intense weight, and it carries ripples across. And so just remembering that it doesn't necessarily need to be an act of service, but simply just taking responsibility for your energy that you're bringing, that you're carrying with you into the space, because the world needs, your medicine. The world needs, yeah, to we all need to be reminded of our, our interwoven connectivity, and ultimately taking responsibility for, you don't necessarily need to be a sound healer or a breathwork facilitator or a yogi at all to be able to positively impact somebody you don't even know or somebody that you love
Mm,
deeply. And so maybe just a reminder of the magnificence and the magnitude of our magic.
I love that. That in essence, we are all healers of humanity.
Yes,
We
we
don't need the
are.
labels. It's in those moments of magic.
And the vibration behind our intentions.
Yeah.
Choose love.
Yeah. I love that, Ali. Now, we have a special treat for all of our listeners. Today, we have, prior to the podcast, recorded a mini 5-minute sound healing, which, having sat in the room whilst this was being recorded, not only did I cry tears of joy, I had goosebumps all over my body.
Mm.
Would you like to share a little bit about the experience you channeled for us today?
Yes. So today I brought my E crystal bowl. So the E corresponds to the solar plexus chakra. It's also smaller and able to transport in
It's
my
practical
backpack.
as
Yeah,
well.
it
Yeah.
also is practical. And so when as I do with any of my transmissions, I play the bowl and I really just tune into the vibration, the frequency. I take some deep breaths and I just let out a sound. And whatever sound wants to come through, I let it come out. And I've been doing quite a bit of work, it's what I call with my clients vocal activation. And it's essentially voice play, letting ourselves play with our divine wind instruments and to explore and to cultivate a sense of curiosity and play for whatever sounds want to come through. And for me, having a bass note that the crystal bowl provides is sort of a drone note that allows me to dance with it. So I'll start with it, and then I'll dance up in it and down below it, and every time it's feeling, where is there resonance? Is there harmony here? Is there? And I'll know, and I'm sure there were moments of it mingled throughout
Mm.
the transmission that weren't in harmonic resonance, and then there were others that sounded perfect, and maybe those are the ones that gave you the shivers or that brought the tears to your eyes. And um yeah, I go somewhere else when I do this. It really feels like it's not coming necessarily from me but through
Through
me.
you. I
Yeah.
definitely had that sense. Yeah, it was just this portal of magic pouring into this
Mm.
space. And the beautiful thing is, not only are we about to play the recording for on the podcast, so hopefully you're all at home and maybe able to light a candle. If you're driving, maybe save it for later. However, if you'd like the audio separately, I will be sending that to Ali as
Mm.
as a download on your website, which is perfect. Again, another segue. Where can we find you? Where can we
Yes.
find you?
Yes, so you can find me at aliskiba.com, aliskiba.com. And I'm also on Instagram as the at melodious yogi. So on my website, there's tons of journeys you can download, from breathwork to sound healing to voice activation. And yeah, I also offer mentorship. So if somebody is feeling called to, learn this work, or for example, you want to learn how to hold a women's circle or a sound healing, event, and you're curious, let me know. I'm working with people all around the world.
Amazing. Ali, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today on The Future Is On. I have so much gratitude. My heart is so full. And for everyone else tuning in, sit tight because we are about to hit play on what I can only describe as a deeply soulful, resonant, healing experience. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much, Ali Skiba.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy.
Oh.